But the thing is, so the writers that have been the most successful are the writers that take accountability when the feedback is provided. But no, it's when you are providing them with advice on how to make things easier on them, or for me as a writing instructor, when you see patterns, you call out the pattern. And you
Mm,
typically, the most effective way to do it is you call it out once. And then it's up to the writer to go through the page and find where it's happening again and again and again. It doesn't
mm.
serve the writer's growth if you give them feedback on every single place that there's an error, because they're not going to grow from that. They have to be able to spot it themselves. Hey everyone, Victoria and Alan here, Blue 7 Content. I think what I want to
Hey,
talk about today is I want to give freelancers some advice, I think is how I want to
what
start
kind of
this
freelancers?
session.
Writers?
Writers, yeah. I want to give some freelance writers some advice because here's the thing. I know we're in the legal industry, that's our primary bread and butter. We do work with other industries as well as a company. I would love to get more into um health, beauty, like that would be really fantastic. Um but here's the thing. In the legal industry with writers, um, because just the term law and legal tends to get like a lot of reputation, I guess, right? And it just feels like you have to be a certain way or you have to have a certain smartness to do it.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like we get these writers that develop these egos. And
Mm.
I guess I just want to share the writers that have worked the best for us are the writers who and I guess this could be somewhat of a shout out to those of you who are trying to create an internal team as well, like what to kind of look
Mm.
for. Because when we interview writers, I mean, Alan, do you remember when we first started Blue 7 and we did that
The
giant
the
call?
marathon rounds of interviews
I
all
mean,
day long,
it was
multiple
like
days.
3 days of half-hour increments, just talking and talking and
Do you remember the
talking.
last interview we had that day? We were drinking and we actually hired her. So like
Did
we
she
were I don't
laugh?
even remember,
Is that
I
her?
think we gave up. It was Giselle. So
Oh, I love her. She's in Seattle now. She's amazing. Shout
I
out to
know.
Giselle. Um, okay. That just like totally brought me into a time
Giselle.
warp. But the thing is, so the writers that have been the most successful are the writers that take accountability when the feedback is provided. And I don't
Okay.
mean the kind of feedback where, it comes off because it also is about the person who's giving the feedback, right? Like
Oh, for
I've
sure.
never really been one to like highlight something and be like WTF. A lot of lawyers will do that.
Yeah, we've worked
And
with a few.
yeah, and the paralegals feel it. Or they sit on their plane and redline everything as if it was a freaking contract and they're a defense attorney for it. Like that could be a whole nother YouTube series. But no, it's when you are providing them with advice on how to make things easier on them, or for me as a writing instructor, when you see patterns, you call out the pattern. And you
Mm,
typically, the most effective way to do it is you call it out once. And then it's up to the writer to go through the page and find where it's happening again and again and again. It doesn't
mm,
serve the writer's growth if you give them feedback on every single place that there's an error, because they're not going to grow from that. They have to be able to spot it themselves. And a lot of the writers have lots of different personalities, but the ones that have truly succeeded are the ones that receive the feedback. They don't argue about the feedback. They give either insight as to why they did it a certain way,
Mhm.
or they request some clarification because this is how they understood, and they're open to receiving some more
Yeah.
feedback. I know that has been the most that is what has been the most successful, because you don't wanna have someone who just assumes that they have it right or are constantly on the defense. Like, it's just
Well,
not a good look.
if we're not given I think we said in our last video, feedback is absolutely essential. Sometimes editors may mistakenly start editing a lot of things because they want to get the page through and not pass that feedback on to the writer. Sometimes that's absolutely necessary because we're under time constraints.
Yep.
But you and I both know from education and to now, it's much better if we can catch something. We try to be very feedback heavy when we start working with people because the quicker you can get everyone in the same mindset, the easier it is. Because if you have to go back and undo later on what's been the norm and you've been allowing things, it's very hard to do. You do yourself a disservice if you don't pass along feedback to your writers, especially if it's repetitive feedback. You're doing
Yep.
yourself a disservice. What you and I know, and we can usually spot these pretty quickly, is and there's writers that really may or may not be with us anymore, who every time you send them feedback, we know immediately they're going to shoot something back and it's going to be on the defensive. I'm not
Yeah.
saying we're always right. I'm not
Correct.
saying we're always right with our feedback. We are open to conversations. But when every single piece of feedback you receive leads to you pushing back, you probably should examine
Yeah.
yourself
Yes.
first. And then
Yes.
open up a discussion with the people that are giving you feedback to understand why this is happening. There may be something, you may be a pretty good writer. They may not be telling you something that you just really aren't getting. You need to have an open dialogue. Victoria and I are over communicators. We try to be.
Yeah.
We try to encourage our editors to be open communicators with writers too. Now, you can give too much info. We have been susceptible to that too. You give too
Yeah.
much and you overwhelm with the feedback, but a lot of times that doesn't happen. That happens when you have neglected to give the feedback earlier on. So you're trying to play catch up and
Yep.
you're like loading all this stuff up on them and the writer's like, you haven't said anything from this happens to us too with clients. We have been
Yeah.
on the other end of this. We didn't know we were doing something wrong. In fact, people, gave us positive feedback. And then all of a sudden, a few months down the line, they're like, well, we've been having problems for months. So where was the email? Where was the phone call?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
writers feel the same way that I do not like, I hate it if I ever have to say, oh, we've been having these issues with your work if there's no documented work going back and
Correct.
forth from the
There's no
editors to them.
trail.
So
Yeah, of seeing it. And I think, a lesson that we've taken away from that is we are very proactive with our clients about asking them for meetings every quarter and just being like, "Hey, what can we do to improve to make things easier for you? What are some common pros or cons with how you're receiving things?" And it can be as simple as, one of our writers uses a blue font for their headers versus black. And the client's like, do you mind just telling them to use black? And
we have
it's
some
like, that's
clients that want
such
only
an
Calibri,
easy,
you know?
yeah, it's such an easy fix. And we're like, 100%, we can totally do that. Um, so, but it very much is, when you're coming into the legal industry, when you're coming into freelance writing, there is a certain level of ego and arrogance that you kind of have to have because lawyers are difficult to work with and lawyers are difficult to get a hold of. And you have to be kind of pushy and you have to show that you have the expertise. Like, as freelance writers, you can say you're experts, right? Like attorneys, we cannot, but as freelancers, you can. Um, but
Put that on
that
your website. I
doesn't
had my expert
mean
freelance writer write this so I can't get in trouble.
but you just can't forget that you are teachable. Like, you cannot forget that part, that you are so expert that you don't need that teachability.
Okay. Well, think about this. You and I would have had every right when we started freelance writing to say we are professional writers. We were, for all
Yep,
intents and purposes. If we had not taken any feedback and learned from the first pieces we started writing back in the teens, we would never have a company. We would never have made our money. It wouldn't
yep,
have been, we wouldn't have, even the best writers with degrees in writing, who taught writing still needed feedback, y'all. And I'm not going to say it doesn't sting. Of course it stings. I hate
yeah,
getting feedback. I hate it. I don't like it.
yeah.
I want everything perfect. But I know I live in reality most of the time. And I have read, I went back and looked at some of my early pieces. Well, y'all, we ought to do a video on that,
We
to look at some of the
should. That
early
would be
things we wrote.
fun.
That'll be the next video we do, y'all. We will put up some videos. Victoria will find one of her first legal pieces, and I'll find one of
I
my first legal
really
pieces.
wanna find the first I remember the first page that you gave me because you were working for that one,
I bet you I
the
got it. I saved everything. It's got to be in the
it's the
files.
employment
Yeah.
it's an employment attorney piece. I mean, it was on sexual harassment, and you were like, "Oh, you're gonna do great with this." And I was obsessed, and that's what kind of
Yep.
got me obsessed with law, and I think started, like, planting the seed
Yeah.
more
Maybe
of,
I
like,
can go
I
to law
think
school. Let's do this.
law school, yeah, is kind of the direction that I need to go. But yeah, like, oh gosh, to read that piece versus now,
Yeah, we're
that
gonna do
would be
that.
a
That'll be the
different
next
reach.
video.
That would be fun,
Hey,
yeah.
all right, folks, feedback. If you, like Victoria said, if you're thinking about having an in-house team, whether you're a marketing agency, a law firm, I understand why you want an in-house team because it can be more expensive if in the long run to hire an outside agency if you have
It's
the
not
means
though.
to
I'm
do the
pushing
in-house
back
team
on that.
correctly.
No, I'm
Well,
pushing
that's
back
what
on
no,
that.
there's a
I
caveat.
don't think
Listen
it's
to my
that
caveat.
expensive.
It's not if you don't have the means to do it right internally, then it's cheaper to work with an agency. Because to do it
Mhm.
right internally is going to cost you as much, if not more, not and maybe not in your money, but your time, folks.
Yeah,
And
that's
time
true.
is money. There it is equivalent. And
Yeah,
what we're telling you now is one little inkling of what Victoria and I have done to grow the company. And that is just dealing with feedback. And that when you get two, three, four, five writers, they're all different personalities, feedback becomes tricky. You have to be good at it. You have to be
yep,
receptive. You have to be open and communicative. And you have to be on the lookout for writers who are accepting of the way that you're operating and ones that aren't going to push back every single time because then it's a writer problem, right? So
yeah,
just keep that in mind. You know, we obviously would love for you to hire us to work, to do your writing. But we're also here to tell you, what the pitfalls are or the pros of trying to go on your own. We just want you to be aware of what you're jumping into because writing and managing writers is an
yeah,
entire business in and of itself. So if it's going to be part of your business, that's like a little sub company, right? That's just the way it
yeah.
is.
And the last thing I'll say for just freelancers in general that are just, like, getting started or launching into their own or, yeah, like, being able to sit in a meeting, receive the criticism, and taking a deep breath and saying, "Thank you for this perspective. I'm gonna review the work. I'm gonna make the changes." Doing so, and then maybe coming back after and saying, "I've made the changes. Here's where it was a little sticky for me. Why did I need like, why are we doing this? Or
Hmm.
what is this for?" That's when you can have a little more conversation. But it's not it really I would just caution those that tend to be defensive and combative is all. Like, I understand even if the delivery of the feedback isn't the kind that you would want. I definitely think pausing, taking a breath, receiving the page, I mean, I remember when I used to hand papers back to my students, I was like, once you receive these grades and these papers and my comments, you are not allowed to talk to me for 24 hours. Then you can email me. And the reason why is because it stings, it hurts, it sucks, like you wanted to do this, you want to do it well, and then someone's telling you that you're not. And writing could be
Yep.
really subjective. I mean, completely and wholly. So, there's just ways to do things to make life easier on you and for you to come across more professional. Anyways, that's all that
Yep.
I've got. So, if we
Yep.
want to
Yeah.
close this off, we can.
Yeah, well, good. And it reminds me, just to top it off, I had a class, globalization, loved it, absolutely fantastic. Dr. Martin, you're awesome. I didn't have the proper prerequisites to be in that class, and I hadn't been through a upper level poli sci class
Mm,
at that point yet. And it just happened to fall. They're like, take it, we'll see what happens. And the first paper that I wrote, and got back, the feedback wasn't great, and it destroyed me. I was like, because I thought I worked at it, but I was the professor saw that it frustrated me because, you knew me back then. We were both at the same school, a little perfectionist, had to get it right.
yep.
I didn't, and then I talked to her later, and she explained it wasn't necessarily the substance, it was the way that it was arranged. And it's similar, I in the next paper, I understood the expectations better
Yep.
and nailed it. I listen, y'all, when we're telling you feedback stuff, it's because we've been on both sides of it our whole lives. So anyway,
Yeah.
like and subscribe. We're going to get to 40. We're almost to
Like
40.
and
So
subscribe.
we'd love
Almost
it.
to 40.
Y'all have a great afternoon.